Hi, everyone, and welcome to our Workers' Comp webinar. My name is Jacob Cole. I'm the marketing coordinator here at CID, and today, Darby Fisher, our work comp underwriter, will be sharing her expertise and helping you write more workers' comp. She'll be going over the specific learning objectives in just a second, but before I pass it off to her, I want to quickly go over the logistics of the webinar. So as you can tell, you're all muted, but there is a chat feature, so you can type in your questions at any time and we'll answer them throughout the webinar. Also, a short survey will pop up after the webinar, so you can help us improve these webinars for you. So we appreciate you taking the time to fill that out. And without further ado, I'll pass it off to Darby.
Good morning, everyone. So I'm going to quickly go over our objectives for today. The first being how to understand workers' comp, how it's performing within commercial insurance in comparison to other lines of business, learning to identify and avoid the most common submission mistakes, reviewing a workers' comp application from an underwriter's point of view. So we're actually going to be going through the ACORD application and view it how I am looking at it when I receive an application. And we're going to discover the competitive edge for successfully writing workers' comp by going through all of these objectives today. So first, I want to briefly touch on how workers' comp is doing in comparison to other commercial insurance. As we're all feeling it, for those of you that write commercial insurance, it really has become a harder to place arena, with rates reflecting ongoing higher premiums in many different coverages and classes of insurance. Some of it being affected greater than others. For professional liability, there's been significant increases, and we're certainly feeling the impact on the property side for have and lesser's risk. The good news is that workers' comp is one of the most stable coverages in both underwriting appetite and class code ratings. So it's still a very competitive environment to participate in, and I would say it's the place to focus right now. So by learning to identify and avoid the most common submission mistakes, as if you're reviewing the account from an underwriter's perspective, it's going to give you that competitive edge in order to obtain a quick quote turnaround, which will enable you to write more workers' compensation. So we're going to jump right in to the most common submission mistakes and how to avoid these. These items cause me a lot of labor and time, so I know they must be causing you extra labor and time as well. In the next few slides, I've provided examples of an incomplete versus complete ACORD application so that we can review the application through the eyes of an underwriter. So on this slide, I've listed out the most common mistakes that we're going to work through, from the name insured being incorrect to a missing FEIN. So all of these items are crucial in order to provide your insured with an accurate, quick, competitive quote. Okay, so the top snippet is an example of an incomplete application versus a complete one below it. So first thing we're going to go over is the applicant name or the named insured. So the named insured should always go where applicant name, which is highlighted, is listed. A lot of brokers send in submissions and they put the named insured where company is. So you can see Infinity Services is listed at company, but then on the applicant name portion, we have Todd Clark DBA Infinity Services. So we want the insured's business name, how they filed with the state, to be where the applicant name is located. The named insured format should also match the entity selection. So for example, in our incomplete application example, the applicant name is Todd Clark DBA Infinity Services. As an underwriter, I would see that and know that the correct entity type should be a sole proprietor. However, the entity selected on the application, you can see they selected corporation. So immediately something is not adding up as I'm reviewing this. Either the named insured is wrong, which as you see on the incomplete application, we have Infinity Services, but then we also have listed Todd Clark DBA Infinity Services. So my brain's going, okay, which one is the actual named insured? Or did the wrong entity get selected? Did they mean to select sole proprietor instead of corporation? So these are some of the things right away that we can avoid. Years in business, that is an underwriting question that's always asked by the carriers, so it needs to be answered. It's almost always left blank, but what the agent and the insured don't know is that it can actually benefit the insured as additional credits are sometimes applied to those in business for a long period of time with no claims. The mailing address, that needs to be listed as well. Don't leave that blank and assume that the underwriter is going to know that the mailing address is the same as the physical address. And lastly, the FEIN. You could see on the incomplete application, it's missing. Without this, you cannot quote with any carrier. It is absolutely mandatory. So we can't move forward taking this to any of our markets without the FEIN. So if we look at our completed application, the named insured, it's listed where applicant name is. It includes the DBA, which is another thing. If your business does have a DBA, it's important to include that there. We know that they've been in business for 4 years. The mailing address is provided, as well as the FEIN. And then the entity is marked a corporation. So before we move to the next slide, I wanted to provide you guys with a helpful tip to confirm the applicant name, and you can do so by searching for the insured on the Secretary of State to confirm that what was provided to you on the application is accurate. So I do this a lot whenever I receive an application, especially if the entity and the applicant name aren't adding up. I'll go and search it on the Secretary of State if I have access, and I could pull the statement of information. So it provides you with the named insured, the officers, the entity type, and all the addresses on file. It's very helpful. Okay, the next section of our application asks for the location addresses. So for the top incomplete section, if the mailing and location address are the same, it's fine to put same as mailing address in this section. However, a PO box could never be a location address for workers' comp. And sometimes I receive an application that has a PO box, so I have to go back and let them know this can't be a physical address on file. If there's multiple location addresses, each should be listed out in this section. However, make sure you provide the entire address in full. I've provided an example here. They gave me 7452 Chesborough Way, but what is the city? What is the zip code? These seem like easy enough things that you wouldn't make a mistake on, but I do receive applications that have this information, and it just creates a lot of back and forth between myself, the broker, and the insured. The proposed effective date, it says October 9th. So the proposed effective date should always be a date in the future, so that way it provides time for your underwriter to quote the business. Otherwise, if I see an application like this, I immediately have to go back and request additional information. My brain's wondering, are we working from a lapse in coverage? Is coverage in place and they're looking to move midterm? Is this a new venture? So again, there's a lot of back and forth that can be avoided by completing this correctly in the first place. So we see that the completed application for the location address is listed out in full. We have a proposed effective date, which is in the future. So on this section of the ACORD application, these are the two sections that I'm looking for to be completed. Next is the contact and ownership information. So the contact information should just include the name, the phone number, excuse me, and an email address. These aren't required to quote, but they are required to bind a policy. So just getting in front of it and providing all the information at once. And then for the ownership information, I see a ton of issues. The first being that the ownership information should be under the included individuals included / excluded. So number one, ownership needs to equal 100%. And number two, this section, when filled out correctly, should include the owner's name, their title within the business, their ownership percentage, and if they wish to be included or excluded. So that's the information I need in order to quote. So in our example for the incomplete application, we see Todd Clark, he's the CEO. The remuneration is provided of 84,000, but what's his ownership percentage? I don't know, so I'll have to go back and ask. I get a lot of brokers who also will list out the business employees by name and their payroll with no classification or description of duties. So you'll see that we have Matt Smith at 69,000. A few issues with this. Number one, employees payroll, this is not where their rating information goes. It's on a separate section. And then two, it makes it difficult to determine if Matt Smith is another owner of the business or if this was placed here by mistake. So make sure that only the officers and those who have ownership of the business are listed in this section. So on the complete application, we have Todd Clark, he's the CEO, 100% ownership, and he wishes to be excluded from coverage. So for the rating section, this is where all of the employee payroll would be inputted. And it's okay if you aren't sure of the class code. If you aren't, it's just important to provide under the categories, duties, and classification section, type in there what's going on with the employee, so that way I can help you to classify that business. So along with the employee count and payroll. So in the incomplete application, we have auto dealer store. So I'm assuming the broker didn't know what the correct class code was, and we have payroll at 68,000. So while I appreciate the description, we're missing the full-time and part-time employee count. So I would have to go back and request that. Same for the line underneath, 8391. They actually knew the class code here and provided the full-time and part-time employees, but there's no annual payroll. And it should always be annual. Sometimes on contracting risks, I'll have brokers put their hourly amount of pay, but I would have to go back and request annually because that's what we're rating on for workers' comp. So ideally what we're looking for in order to quote is the class code or description, the employee count broken out by full-time versus part-time, and the corresponding annual payroll. So we have a few questions in the chat that I'm going to answer. The first being, do non-W-2 workers need to be included in the rating of the policy, and would they be counted as employees or subcontractors? So no, they would, if they're a non-W-2 worker, they would not be counted as employees and they should not be rated for on the policy. Subcontractors or 1099 employees should be covered under their own workers' compensation policy. The second question, how do carriers handle a split classification code when an employee is performing two separate functions? So I actually see this often with contracting risks. Sometimes an employee may be doing carpentry work and also painting work. How we decide on what the employee will be classified under is they actually should be rated under the higher classification, whatever the higher rate is for that class, in order to avoid any issues at audit. And we have the third question, how can I get the class code? So there's actually some resources that you guys can utilize. So for California risks, you can reach out to the WCIRB and send them an email basically with the description of work that the insured's doing, and they can help and assist you to classify the business properly. And then all risks that are outside of California, you would reach out to the NCCI. I can go ahead and get that information over to you in an email after the webinar with some more specifics. Moving forward, some other items to address, and they're the last submission mistakes, are ensuring that a description of operations are provided. So you and I need to understand what the business is doing so that the information can assist us in better underwriting the risk. There's a section on the ACORD 130 that asks for the nature of the business, so you can provide it there or you can provide it in an email, but make sure to obtain this information from the insured. And then in regards to coverage history, another issue that causes me probably the most amount of extra labor just because of the lack of information that's provided. So I wanted to make this super clear for you all. That way you can obtain this information up front and know what you're asking for. So if we're working from a firm proposed effective date, meaning the insured has current coverage in place and they're potentially coming up for renewal, I need loss runs. That's going to be required. Typically, our carriers ask for 4 years if they've been in business that long. Second thing, lapse in coverage. If we're working from a lapse of coverage, the date of lapse and the reasoning as to why is required, along with the loss runs prior to the lapse. And then if it is a new venture or it's just their first time obtaining workers' comp, this needs to be stated on the ACORD 130. So your objective as an agent is sales and to write more business. And by being knowledgeable and efficient and asking the right questions up front and obtaining accurate information saves yourself time avoiding the back and forth with the underwriter and the insured. And while sending over a complete application to the underwriter might seem straightforward, I do receive incomplete applications on a daily basis with these mistakes, which prevents me from quoting the business for you and providing you with that quick competitive quote. And in turn, it prevents you from writing more workers' comp. So getting in front of these, making note of these common submission mistakes will really help you to grow your book of business by obtaining a quick competitive quote. So now that we've gone through submission mistakes to avoid in order to receive a quick competitive quote, it's important to recognize that having a competitive edge is more than just pricing. So not just as an underwriter, but as agents to the insured, efficiently analyzing and understanding your risk is imperative to obtaining that competitive quote for your insured. So reviewing the items listed in this slide and incorporating that as part of your submission process will help you understand your markets better in relation to where the insured can get a competitive quote, giving you that leverage over another broker. So if you can obtain a copy of the insured's current policy, it'll help you determine where the premium and rates need to come in when quoting. Getting insight to how their policy is structured will give you an advantage over another agent who wants the same business. Because potentially there's a misclassification with some of the employees, or you know that one of your markets has better credit authority. So you can identify and point that out to the insured. And I know obtaining the current policy is sometimes difficult, so even asking for the target premium or what markets they've already approached will be beneficial to you. You can also confirm the classifications listed on the ACORD 130 to ensure they're accurate and their policy is classified correctly. As I mentioned previously, utilize those resources such as the WCIRB for California risks and the NCCI for all other state risks. Even I'm underwriting daily, but there's even times where I don't 100% know if this could be the best classification for the insured. So I'll send a quick email to the WCIRB or the NCCI just to confirm like, hey, I just want to make sure these business operations fall in line with this class code. Can you please confirm this for me? So I do that often, and you guys utilizing that will be helpful as well. I mentioned it already, but also utilizing the Secretary of State to ensure that the structure of the policy is correct, which is that name insured and entity. And lastly, the physical loss runs, which are going to be one of the biggest indicators on where that premium may fall. Because with poor loss history, it may indicate that the insured's experience mod rating is high, resulting in a debit on the policy. Therefore, it's even more important to know which markets are going to apply those additional credits or have competitive rates when quoting. Some carriers look for claim severity, others are making a decision based on the frequency of claims occurring. So even if the insured does have poor claims history, you can guide them in the right direction on how to turn it around. And a successful strategy that I utilize is offering the carrier's loss control services. So success goes beyond just price, and incorporating some of these additional underwriting steps can help you write more business. A business owner is more likely to write business with you if they feel you understand the risk thoroughly and are working in benefit of the insured in more ways than just pricing. So, some additional strategies for securing the bind order. You need a strong close, and making a formal presentation that shows premium is competitive because of aggressively priced rates, the insured's experience mod, maybe giving a market summary of all of the markets you approach and what their premium was at, or a clean claims history. It makes it easy for the insured to see everything clearly, because it could be really overwhelming for an insured when they're getting all this information thrown at them, especially for an insured that doesn't know anything about insurance. So by being able to speak knowledgeably about classifications and rates applied or carrier services such as loss control and claims management will help you in securing the bind. You just want to be making everything crystal clear for the insured and know that they can sit back, relax, you have their policy under control because you know what you're doing. And the message to be getting across to the insured is that they can trust you to do your job efficiently and knowledgeably, ultimately saving the insured money and managing their policy successfully. And by incorporating some of these extra underwriting steps, in the long run, it is going to help you build premium volume within your book of business. So I want to point you in the right direction on what classes of business are having the most success in the current marketplace with competitive rates and premium. Just touching on a few, restaurants such as fast food and full service, those are always doing well with our markets and is typically a business exposure where you can obtain a quick quote. The same goes for retail stores. It's a very expansive class, so it could be a nail salon to a laundromat or a barber shop. Trucking operations and home healthcare are recent classes of business that it seems our markets are wanting to write a lot of. And while they require a little bit of more underwriting review, markets are pricing them competitively. So these are good classes to go after, and you want to be going after trending classes of business. And lastly, writing good business that stays on the books, because that's the best way to be a competitive broker in the workers' comp arena. And how you do that is by selecting stable, payroll-driven classes of business. Some of those include retail stores, restaurants, professional offices. Once you've bound that policy, it's important to maintain a meaningful business relationship with the insured. That way they aren't seeing what other brokers are out there. So again, your objective from all of this is to sell to the insured that you can entrust them to manage their business successfully by providing them with a quick and competitive quote, utilizing some of the strategies that I talked about today. So I appreciate all of you guys for listening. I'm going to hand this back over to Jacob.
All right, thank you, Darby. If anyone has any questions that weren't answered during the webinar, now's the time to chat them in so we can answer them before we sign off. It does look like there's a question, so I'm going to pop that in for you, Darby.
Okay.
There you go. I'll let you answer that real quick.
Okay, so we have a question in the chat regarding payroll broken out by class code or location. What is the correct way to break out the payroll, if at all? So if there's multiple locations, then the best way on the rating page is to have the location listed. So it can just be location 1 and then the payroll associated with that. If there's multiple class codes, so let's say we have a business that does a homeowners association and also clerical, and they have multiple locations. So location 1, you'll do 9066, which is the HOA class code, along with that associated payroll. And then the line under, it could be location 1 as well, 8810 clerical office employees and that annual payroll. And then down below, if there's a location 2, it would be the same thing. So you just want to make sure you're notating somewhere on the rating page if there's multiple locations, what location that payroll is associated with. If that doesn't explain it clearly, you can definitely shoot me an email or give me a call after the webinar, and I can break it down in more depth for you.
Perfect. Thank you, Darby. Good
Yeah.
question. Yeah, go ahead and keep typing your questions in. We'll stay on as long as we need to get them all answered. And then after we do sign off, I encourage everyone to browse our website. We have tons of tools for you and your office to use. We have marketing materials, proposal templates, fillable applications, online quoting options, and a ton of recorded webinars for you and your team to watch. Also, don't hesitate to reach out to Darby. Her contact info is on the screen there. And if you have completed applications on file, you can start sending those over to her to that submissions email that you see on screen. Be sure to stay on so you guys can complete the survey. Help us make these webinars better for you in the future. We do have one final webinar this year, so I encourage you all to go to our website and sign up for that. And the 2025 webinar schedule will be launching soon, so be on the lookout for that. But let us know if you guys have any topics that you want us to cover next year. We're always open to new ideas. So it looks like we don't have any more questions, so that'll do it for today's webinar. We appreciate you all joining us, and we look forward to doing business with you. Have a great day.